It's your $2 Tuesday movie critic here today with another movie review. So I'm going to be reviewing Guardians of the Galaxy today. Now I know that's been out for a while. It came out in August and this is like the beginning of September for the most part. But I have been trying to see it for a while. So I finally got to see it and I have to say I really enjoyed it. It's such a great movie. I love the action. I love the camaraderie that came after a while between the Guardians themselves. I really enjoyed the music, of course. That was one of my favorites. And it was just a really great movie. It did not disappoint. Okay, so full disclosure, I never saw any of the Guardian of the Galaxy comic books, which the movie is based off of. And after looking at it, quite a few people have never heard of the comic book. But quite a few people more than a few people, love the movie. And whatever they were trying to do with this movie, they succeeded in doing. Marvel has succeeded once again with their comic book hero characters. Things that I loved about this movie was it had a gang of not necessarily they were likable characters, but they were not necessarily good people in a way. Chris Pratt, who was Peter Quill, well, you take him. He was not so good of a guy. You see at the beginning of the movie, he's just a kid, and unfortunately his mom is dying. And, he's just a kid, so he's really trying to just understand what is happening in his life. And then, he, like most kids would do, he gets upset from it, and then he ends up getting kidnapped by aliens. And that's just a whole nother situation. And then they flash forward 2 decades later to when he's an adult, and now he's part of the group that kidnapped him. He's part of that group now, and they're called the Ravagers, and they're led by Yondu, who is like a paternal father-like figure to Peter Quill. Unfortunately, he's not that good of an influence. Well, he did kidnap the kids, so how much of a good influence could he possibly be? But you could tell when Yondu comes into the picture that he does have affection for him. He does have a soft spot for him. So Peter is he's part of the Ravagers, so he's one of the guys that he also goes and he steals stuff. And at this point, he's going to steal the orb that Yondu has sent him to get. The other character that we have is Zoe Saldana, who is Gamora, and Gamora is an assassin. And in this picture, she's not very liked by a lot of people and a lot of the characters in the movie because she is an assassin and because they know her to work for Ronan, who is the most vicious, evil character in the galaxy. And they know that she's an assassin for him, so, everybody pretty much wants her head under a guillotine. And then you have the character of Drax. Drax is played by Dave Bautista. And Drax is just this huge, muscle-bound man that has had a lot of pain in his life. He lost his family at the hands of Ronan, and now he's seeking revenge. And so, he would do whatever it takes and knock down whoever he has to in order to get that revenge. It's not about justice. It's about him getting revenge to, avenge his family that he lost. And then the next character is Groot, who is my favorite. I love Groot. Groot has one whole sentence in the movie. Well, 2. But for the most part, his sentence is, "I am Groot." And he doesn't always, he has different ways that he says it. He emphasizes it in a way to let you know, hey, I'm the man. And sometimes he's just saying, hello, this is who I am. And, Groot is I think he's the heart of the team because he, he's strong as basically a tree, which he is, but he also has this beautiful heart, and he's a very kind, and he's the one that looks out for the last of the Guardian of the Galaxy members, Rocket, who is played by Bradley Cooper. And Rocket, or the voice of Bradley Cooper, I should say. And the voice of Groot is played by Vin Diesel. Also love him. So, Bradley Cooper does the voice of Rocket, who is not your ordinary raccoon. He actually, find out in the movie that he's actually a science experiment. And he has a lot of anger, which is warranted, and he loves weapons, as you will see. And, you know, Groot looks out for Rocket, and they're like, those are the only two that are connected before all of the rest get together. All of them, they do bad things, but in the end, they end up working together to stop the galaxy from being destroyed by Ronan, the evil guy. And so, and that's the thing. Each one of them has their own backstory of a lot of loss and a lot of bad things that have happened to them that put them in the position that they're in when they meet. And then because of that position, and because each of them has a connection to Ronan, whether directly or indirectly, that they decide to work together in order to not only keep Ronan from getting the orb, but also saving the galaxy from being destroyed by Ronan. And it's just a really great movie. The music that that Peter Quill plays, aka Star Child, plays, that was given to him by his mom, you know, is just so great. I love the music because it just took me back, you know, to my oldie station. And sometimes, I have to say, sometimes when the music came on a certain song, it was like, okay, this song doesn't necessarily fit the situation, which was not always the case, but sometimes it was. But you couldn't deny that the music was good. It was really good. So, you know, I would say that this is like one of those movies that's cool for teenagers to watch. There were some cliche things, but not much. Actually, I think the most cliche thing is where the group starts to work together, or decide to work together, but then something crazy happens, and they end up messing things up, and then they get back together and they fix things. And, well, that usually goes with any group superhero movie. It's not necessarily one of those movies where it's predictable, you know. So you don't necessarily know what's going to happen, especially listening to the music. So, my final recommendation is that it's a good movie. There were a few curse words in there, but it wasn't a lot. And even though there was a lot of fighting with the swords and things like that, there wasn't a lot of goriness to the movie. And, you know, it was more about the action, you know, from the fighting and the explosions and just showing the anger of Rocket. So it was a lot of that. But there wasn't much goriness to the movie. I mean, there was some stuff that went on in the prison, but the scene itself wasn't that long. So it was pretty cool. I think that, you know, teenagers will love it. I think that younger kids may love it too, maybe like your tweens and stuff. I don't know if the younger kids, younger than that, are going to get it or want to see the whole thing. Even though there's a lot of action, most parents wouldn't want their kids to see all of the shooting and things like that, because there is a lot of shooting going on and things. But if you're okay with that, or if you have, you know, talked to your kids about, you know, this is make-believe, but this is real, or whatever the case may be, I think it's one of those movies that the whole family could probably enjoy. Because it is pretty cool. And it is the Marvel superheroes. And as usual, Stan Lee makes his cameo appearance. I always look for that. And he did not disappoint. He came again, made his cameo appearance. I won't tell you where it is because I don't want to ruin it for anybody. But it was really cool. So I recommend this movie to anyone. I plan to get it when it comes on DVD. It was really great. I can't wait to see it again because it was just that cool. The old school movies that I compared this to were, one was in the 90s. One was done in the 90s, and the other was done in the new millennium, but just in the early part. So the first one is, I'll talk about the one that was done in the 90s. This is Mortal Kombat! Anybody remembers that? It's been a while. Okay. So, Mortal Kombat came out in 1995, and this movie was based off the video game. Now, I had never heard of Mortal Kombat either when it came out. My boyfriend at the time had, and I didn't actually plan to see it, even though I love action movies. I wasn't a big video game person, so I thought it was going to be pretty lame. And he's like, we got to go see this, you know. So, I take him to some movies. He takes me some of his movies, so I went. And I have to say, it was pretty good. I enjoyed it. Even he had to explain, some of the things with some of the characters and their moves, because those are the same moves that they're famous for in the video game. And so it was pretty cool. The characters in Mortal Kombat are Liu Kang, who's played by Robin Shaw, Johnny Cage, who's played by Lyndon Ashby, Sonya Blade, who's played by Bridget Wilson. Those are the three main characters, the three main warriors in the movie. And these guys, basically, the way I compare it to Guardians of the Galaxy is the fact that these guys themselves, they don't like each other. Well, the reason why they got together was different, but their goal ended up being the same, winning the Mortal Kombat, because it is to decide the fate of Earth, So what happens is these three martial artists are chosen by Lord Raiden, who's also in it, and to enter a tournament. And this determines the fate of the world. And then there's the evil sorcerer, Shang Tsung, who basically tries to do everything to destroy these warriors and any other warriors that are fighting against his. And you have, all of these different guys that are in the video game that come out, and I won't go into all the characters, but there you have it. Johnny Cage, Liu Kang, and Sonya, who is an officer of the law. They all have different reasons for being there, just like on the Guardians of the Galaxy. They all each have a backstory for why they came. Liu came to get revenge for his brother's death. Johnny Cage comes to get credibility, because everybody pretty much thinks he's just a pretty boy pretending to know martial arts when he really doesn't. And then you have Sonya, who, like I said, is an officer of the law, who comes to get justice for her partner, who was killed by one of the evil sorcerer's, Shang Tsung's disciples, or one of his warriors. And so they all come looking for their different reasons, but then they meet Lord Raiden, who tells them, I need your help in order to win this tournament, in order to save the world. And they agree reluctantly to work together. And it's not always, great between them. And Lord Raiden ends up intervening a couple of times and letting them know, hey, if you guys don't get over your issues, you're going to not only end up destroying yourselves, but letting the world be destroyed as well. And it works out. Mortal Kombat brought martial arts to the video game genre. And so that's another way to compare it, because these Guardians of the Galaxy brought a whole different type of superhero. None of these guys would necessarily be considered a superhero on their own. You have a raccoon that's been experimented on. You have a tree, basically a living, walking tree. You have a human that has no superhero powers to speak of. And probably, Gamora, who is an assassin, and she can kick butt. Yeah, so she's more like Liu Kang's character, where they actually, just use their fists of fury and kick butt. Then you have Drax, who also is a great fighter and warrior, but unfortunately, because he's filled with so much rage, he does not think logically, and he ends up using his rage and his anger, and it gets him into trouble sometimes. And that's kind of like with Johnny Cage. He kind of moves before he thinks. He's just so quick to try to prove that he is a legitimate martial artist, that he's willing to jump into any fight and do anything to prove it. And it kind of gets him into trouble a couple of times too. It's not as bad as how Drax gets into trouble, but yeah. And so the kind of characters are kind of similar, where they all have different backstories that bring them to the situation that they're in, and also that the reason why they're chosen in the first place. Of course, in Guardians of the Galaxy, they kind of like decide that they're going to save the galaxy, as opposed to in Mortal Kombat, Lord Raiden is the one that chooses these martial artists, and he comes to them and lets them know, and then they make the choice to fight. So those are how I get the similarities between the characters, and that's how I got the similarity between the two movies. Their intentions at the very end are altruistic, where all they want to do is serve the world, and also they become friends. They begin to actually trust each other, where in the beginning they did not, and that happens in both movies, where in the beginning all of these people were pretty much fighting against each other. They wanted nothing to do with each other, and in the end, you know, they become friends and they depend on each other, and it's with that that they end up accomplishing their goal to a certain extent. Okay, so and that's how I compare the two movies. The second old school movie that I chose to compare to Guardians of the Galaxy is the movie The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. The list of characters are, you have Alan Quartermain, who's the marksman, and he's played by Sean Connery. You have Captain Nemo, who is played by Naseeruddin Shah. And then you have Mina Harker, who is chemist / vampire, who's played by Peter Wilson. You have Rodney Skinner, who is the Invisible Man, who's played by Tony Curran. And then there's Dorian Gray, who is the Immortal, and he's played by Stuart Townsend. And then you have Agent Tom Sawyer, who's played by Shane West. And you have Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, who are both played by Jason Fleming. And lastly, there is Professor Moriarty, also known as the Phantom, and he is played by Richard Roxburgh. Now, these characters, the characters who play the extraordinary gentlemen, are, you know, basically the same as the Guardians of the Galaxy, where they are all individuals who end up with the kind of like a goal that places them in the same place together, where they end up working together. And some of these characters, like for instance the chemist / vampire Mina, and then of course Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, and the Immortal, these are characters that are not necessarily looked at in a good light, but they end up doing good things, so to speak. Well, when they end up deciding to be a part of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, then, you know, you expect them to fight, because basically they're fighting against Professor Moriarty, who we know from the Sherlock Holmes novels, and they're fighting against him because Professor Moriarty is trying to, once again, destroy the world. That's the goal. And, you know, initially they think he's trying to destroy the world for, you know, to gain money, and then they find out that he's trying to destroy the world for a whole nother reason. He's not necessarily trying to destroy the world as much as he's trying to rule the world and, you know, create these superhero characters from parts of each of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And So they end up working together. And the thing about these people, too, is because they're not necessarily all likable characters, they don't trust each other. And for some very good reasons. And they end up, fighting against each other instead of working together initially. And then they realize in order to accomplish the goal of defeating Moriarty, they're going to have to work together. And that's what happens in the Guardians of the Galaxy as well. They see that they can't accomplish their goal without working together. No one person is going to be able to defeat the Ronin. They have to work together because both Moriarty in A League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and Ronin in Guardians of the Galaxy, these are both very strong, very evil, very powerful guys, and they're not going to be easily destroyed or thwarted from their dastardly deeds. So, in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, what ends up happening is they decide to work together, and they find out that some of their distrust issues are warranted, and that they need to, reevaluate things. And another way that this is, all of the characters, like I said before, are based on, there was actually a comic book called The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, just like there's a comic book for the Guardians of the Galaxy. So another way that this is compared is the fact that, in the end, they end up having a good, a strong camaraderie with each other to the point where they try to save the other's lives in order to, just because they care for each other. They begin to care for each other in this league. And it doesn't just necessarily become about destroying Moriarty. It comes about, making sure that everyone survives until the end. Or, hopefully longer than that. And another way that, so those are like the similarities. And both have a lot of great action scenes. I mean, the action scenes in all three movies actually are really great. You have your, there's more martial arts stuff in Mortal Kombat, but there's a lot of fisticuffs, hand-to-hand, in both Guardians of the Galaxy and the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And also, where with the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, there are some characters that have immortal type powers, just like in the Guardians of the Galaxy, where you have your Groot and you have your Drax, who are kind of like, well, they are alien type characters, and of course Rocket, who doesn't necessarily have super strength, but he is very smart. He's just like with the Invisible Man. He is not, a strong character, physically, but he is very smart and he's very cunning. So, and that ends up helping a lot. Just like Rocket plays a big part in helping his team a lot. So, yeah, there's a lot of good comparisons. I know some people may think that these three movies are comparing them and thinking that they're similar is quite a stretch, but I think it works. I really do. So let me know what you think at the bottom of the screen. That's all I have for tonight. I'm sorry. That's all I have for this review. So let me know what you think at the bottom of the screen, if you think there are some other movies that compare better to Guardians of the Galaxy. And I will see you next time.